The Lost Tribe of the Sith by John Jackson Miller. Lost Tribes of the Sith is a collected mini-story series written by John Jackson Miller. It takes place 5,000 years before the Battle with Yavin. This series takes place during what is known as the Great Hyperspace War, about 5,000 years before the Battle of Yavin, or the original trilogy. Led by... Now, this year is thousands of years later, after the dawn of the Jedi, and about 2,000 to 3,000 years after the fallen Jedi had their civil war with the Jedi. One following the path of the light side, following more of the path of the light side, while the other follows more of the path of the dark side. The fallen Jedi, he would later settle the planet Korriban and rename themselves the Sith, after the Sith alien species that are native on the planet Korriban. And then, centuries later, about a couple thousand years later, two Republic's scouts or members, as what is told within the Tales of the Jedi comics, accidentally venture and run into the planet in which they meet the Sith after their emperor was laid in a grave, and two competing Sith, known as Ludocresh and Nagasadar, compete with each other to gain the title as Dark Lord of the Sith, as well as becoming the new Emperor of the Sith. And this book first takes place during that time period. It actually spans some 3,000 years. This book has stories that span some 3,000 years from the time period between 5,000 BBY before the Battle of Yavin to about 2,000 BBY before the Battle of Yavin. It talks about a group of Sith on the ship known as Aben, in which they were tasked by Nagasadar, who led an invasive army, an invasion on the Republic, but ultimately failed. And I'll talk about this when I talk about the Tales of the Jedi comics and the Great Hyperspace War. But this group of Sith, led by their Captain Yaru Corson, was tasked by Nagasadar to venture out and travel and seek after some rare kyber crystals so that they could create new and more lightsabers for their army that they will raise to fight the Republic, but it ultimately fails. In the Tales of the Jedi comics, the Republic eventually wins and captures Korriban, defeating the Sith Empire, and drives Nagasadar out into the space, in which he settles and inhabits the planet or the moon the fourth moon of Indor. No, Yavin. Sorry, one of the moons of Yavin. The same Yavin in which the Battle of Yavin will take place. There will be a new hope. They build and then they build their own structures, including one of the pyramids in which the Rebel Alliance would hide out on the Battle of Yavin thousands of years later. And their ship and their task and their ship would be buried within its tomb, within one of the pyramids. And that's a story that I want to get into another time, which would continue the story of the Tales of the Jedi. But as for now, the lost tribe of the Sith, led by Captain Yara Corson, venture out, and then they get lost. They get drifted. They get lost, and a planet, and they land and crash on the planet with a native population vastly primitive to their own, with no space technology at all, and they get stranded there for decades, in which the Sith have to figure out what they want to do. Ren still die there, so they conquer the native people by imposing themselves as one of the warrior gods in which the natives worship, and they declare themselves as some of their deities or gods, and eventually get some power over the natives worshipping the Sith as some of the warrior gods. And then a couple of times they had a rebellion, a couple of rebellions among the natives, but not as drastic as some of these native rebels eventually venture out and inhabit another local island, in which the Sith would discover some thousand years later. But the Sith will ultimately compete among themselves, because that's what Sith do when it comes to embracing the dark side. So they compete amongst themselves on whom they believe should rule among the elite of the family, the lineages of the elite family, and they battled among themselves, and for generations it's this on and off type of war or battle among these different Sith family groups. And they get stranded on this planet for 3,000 years, or for generations, and their ship, known as Amen, gets severely damaged. So yeah, they're stuck there. And there's one story in which later on a farmer or one of the Sith women interacts with a farmer whom she later finds out is a stranded Jedi, stranded from the Echal Kun war, or the war against the Echal Kun, which this story takes place about over 1,000 years after the Great Hyperspace War, which occurred about 5,000 years before the Battle of Yavin, and then she has to figure out what to do with this Jedi, and um, later the Sith leaders find out about it, and they try to venture out and kill the Jedi, and reclaim his starfighter, his ship. But eventually, it gets to a point in which this Sith lady, trying to remember what her name was. There's 8 different stories in this book, so I have to try to remember what her name was. But this Sith lady who found the farmer, who was the Jedi, she eventually finds that he's not as bad of a person, and she teams up with him. Later, starts a romantic relationship with him, and they team up with him, and they destroy and blow up his ship, along with the Sith leaders um, that found out about the Jedi. And yet again, they get stranded on this planet, and for yet another 1,000 years. And that particular story I found very interesting, because it kind of it pretty much gets a juice on what's going on in the main galaxy and what occurred um, during that time period, and what happened with the Sith and the Republic. And the Jedi essentially said that, yeah, the Republic and the Jedi defeated and won the Great Hyperspace War against the Sith Empire. We took over Korriban. And then another Sith faction led by Etal Kuden rose up, but we also swiftly took care of him as well, and essentially establishing the fact with that Sith woman who found the Jedi, that we're pretty much goners. The Sith Empire is gone. The new faction is gone as well. What's the point of trying to venture out and get some help? So that's one of the reasons why she teamed up with him and destroyed his ship, along with the fact that they developed a romantic relationship with each other, despite the differences between their theology. Though, of course, the Sith theology and code was gradually changing throughout the Lost Tribes exile on this planet, or when they got stranded there. But another thing that I liked about this particular mini story about the Jedi is that they eventually learn about Revan, and I'm a huge fan of Revan, so that's another reason why I found it interesting and unique. But the Lost Tribe stories continue on until a couple thousand more years, until a Sith known as Hilt eventually took the reins around 2000 BBY, and he became the new leader of this Lost Tribe of the Sith, and that eventually leads into the Lost Tribe of the Sith comics, takes place after this novel, also written by Jackson Miller. I'll talk about that as well. I didn't talk about too much within this story because within this book because there's a lot to talk about. There's a whole bunch about there's 8 mini stories within it. Um, this whole different blood rivalry between the Corson and his brother, and then their descendants, and whom should rule, take charge after them. So it's this on and off of fighting and whatnot between the two families, and until eventually it ends with Hilton taking control, and then he unites the Sith after that. Before the lost tribe of the Sith, the comets began. So it's just a multi-generational conflict between these competing Sith and who should rule over this planet and over the natives, in which they're posing as gods over them. And yeah, it's all quite interesting. It's all quite interesting indeed. And I didn't want to talk too much about this book because there's a lot to talk about, given that there's 8 mini stories within it. But it's a really excellent book. It's a good book if you want to learn more about the Sith and whatnot. What took place with them, and all that kinds of stuff. With this break off or splinter group from the lost tribe of the Sith. It's a really good story, in my opinion. A really good book. And yeah, since it takes place 5,000 to 2,000 years before the Battle of Yavin, and it's a standalone book because of the timeline and it being a standalone book. I would say, yeah, you can keep it within the Star Wars Legends timeline continuity. There's nothing too controversial with this book, so I would say, yeah, if you want to keep it within the Star Wars Legends continuity, the timeline, I say go ahead and do it. A lot of the Old Republic books, most of the Old Republic stories, I would probably say go ahead and keep them within the timeline, the continuity. They take place thousands of years before that. But yeah, I wanted to talk a bit about it, along with the previous book with Dawn of the Jedi, and then my next videos are going to be my next Star Wars Legends videos are going to be me talking about the Revan novelization. I'm a huge fan of Revan. I'm going to be that's probably going to be a long video, so just to warn you. And then with the novel Deceived as well, with Darth Malgus and the Sith attacking the Republic once again. So yeah, stay tuned for those videos. I don't know when I'm going to be releasing them, but when it comes to Star Wars Legend books, those are going to be the next books I'm going to be talking about: Revan and Deceived. And then I'm going to be taking a short break from the Star Wars books talking about some other books as well, such as Jurassic Park that I've read. As I read more from the Star Wars novels, as I get more in tune with all that. So I also wanted this video to be me talking about what my next videos would be about and where I'm going to be going with those videos. So yeah, stay in tune with those, and I hope that you all have a good day, and